November 17, 2023. Sam Altman joined a call with OpenAI's board. Minutes later, he was no longer CEO. Silicon Valley was stunned. Employees threatened to leave. Microsoft demanded answers. And the company behind ChatGPT suddenly appeared to be tearing itself apart. At the center of the chaos was a much bigger question. Who should control the future of artificial intelligence? The formal announcement sent shockwaves far beyond tech circles. In a terse public statement, OpenAI's board of directors declared that Altman had not been consistently candid in his communications, though they offered no specific details of misconduct. This breakdown in trust, they claimed, hindered their ability to exercise their responsibilities. It was a corporate rupture that exposed a stark, systemic vulnerability. This was an institution founded as a non-profit, dedicated to ensuring that artificial general intelligence would benefit all of humanity. Now, the very organization building technology to safely govern the future of human intelligence had proven unable to govern itself. The sudden ouster of its chief executive laid bare a glaring contradiction. If a hand-picked board could not manage the leadership of a single laboratory, how could the world trust them with a technology capable of reshaping civilization? The struggle shifted from a theoretical debate about safety into a real-time battle for power at the frontier of human innovation, revealing a massive divide between the idealistic mission of the company and the realities of commercial scale. To understand how Sam Altman became powerful enough to trigger a crisis across Silicon Valley, we have to go back to the beginning. On November 17, 2023, the board's formal authority collided with the practical realities of who built and controlled the technology. Within hours of the announcement, co-founder Greg Brockman resigned from his post in solidarity with Altman. Inside the offices, a quiet panic transformed into an organized mutiny. Employees drafted an open letter demanding the board resign and bring the chief executive back. The list of signatories grew rapidly, starting with 500 staff members and quickly rising to more than 700, representing almost the entire workforce. These employees threatened to resign en masse, though they remained in their roles while awaiting a resolution. This was a direct threat to empty the research labs, and it did not represent a completed departure. Microsoft Chief Executive Officer Satya Nadella intervened publicly, altering the balance of power. Nadella offered to hire Altman, Brockman, and any other staff members who chose to leave, promising them equivalent resources to run a new advanced artificial intelligence team inside Microsoft. By offering this alternative, Microsoft established a secondary power center that stripped the board of its practical control. The directors held legal authority, but they did not own the trust of the engineers, the researchers, or the massive computing infrastructure required to keep the systems online. The nonprofit board quickly discovered that without its builders, the organization was nothing but a shell. By November 22, 2023, the board's resistance collapsed. Sam Altman returned as chief executive officer, and Greg Brockman resumed his role as president. The governing body that had dismissed Altman was almost entirely replaced. A new initial board took shape, chaired by Brett Taylor and featuring Lawrence Summers, alongside existing member Adam D'Angelo. Microsoft, having committed $13 billion to the venture, later secured a non-voting observer seat, cementing its strategic position. This resolution revealed a stark reality about modern corporate power. The original directors held the legal right to fire their leader, but that authority proved useless when employees, investors, and strategic partners refused to cooperate. Altman's influence did not depend on a formal title. It was woven directly into the daily operations and personal loyalties of the workforce. While the deep internal motives behind the board's initial decision remain unconfirmed, the concrete outcome was clear. The original guardrails designed to restrain a powerful founder had shattered under the weight of commercial realities. To understand how Sam Altman became powerful enough to trigger a crisis across Silicon Valley, we have to go back to the beginning. Samuel Harris Altman was born in Chicago on April 22, 1985. When he was 4 years old, his family relocated to Clayton, a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. As the eldest of 4 children, he grew up in a household where discussion was constant and competition was encouraged. It was a classic Midwestern setting, but inside the family home, the atmosphere was fast-paced and intellectually demanding. His relationship with technology shifted permanently at age 8 when he received a Macintosh Classic. The small computer with its monochrome screen immediately captured his attention. For Altman, this machine was a mechanism to be understood. He spent nights in his bedroom teaching himself the fundamentals of computer science, translating his ideas into lines of code. He discovered that programming was a direct dialogue with a machine, a process of giving precise instructions and studying how the system executed them. This self-directed study consumed his free time, transforming a childhood hobby into a persistent interest in software design. This focus continued during his years at the John Burroughs School in Ladue, a rigorous preparatory academy. There he found a mentor in Georgian Kepshar, a computer science teacher who saw his unusual drive. Kepshar did not limit him to basic lessons. She supported his independent projects and encouraged him to think about the potential of artificial intelligence long before it was a mainstream concept. Under her guidance, Altman explored advanced computing concepts and built his first independent software programs. There was no grand narrative of future dominance during these early years, only an intense, persistent curiosity. In the quiet neighborhoods of St. Louis, he was simply a student fascinated by the structured logic of machines, learning the rules of a digital world that he would soon try to expand. In the fall of 2003, Altman left Missouri for California, enrolling at Stanford University to study computer science. He arrived at a campus that was rapidly becoming the epicenter of a rebuilding tech sector. The wreckage of the dot-com bust had cleared, and in its place, a new wave of practical, highly ambitious engineers was emerging. Stanford was not merely an academic environment. It functioned as a high-velocity testing ground where venture capital, student-led startups, and cutting-edge software engineering collided daily. For 2 years, Altman balanced academic requirements with the intense energy of the Valley. He mastered complex algorithms, wrote code late into the night, and observed how ideas on campus transformed into commercial entities. But as he studied, the technological environment outside the classroom shifted. Mobile technology was undergoing a fundamental shift. Cell phones, once limited to voice and basic text, were suddenly gaining global positioning capabilities. It was a clear signal that the physical and digital worlds were about to merge. To Altman, the timing felt critical. The window of opportunity to define how people use location-based mobile software seemed fleeting. Waiting 2 more years to finish a degree began to look like a recipe for missing the wave entirely. In 2005, at 19 years old, Altman made his choice. He dropped out of Stanford without a degree. This departure was not a preordained step toward a guaranteed victory. It was a blind leap of faith. He traded the safety of an elite credential for the volatile reality of the startup world. The shift was absolute. He was no longer a student analyzing technology from the sidelines. He was a founder, staking his immediate future on an unproven mobile market, trying to build a business out of raw ambition and an uncertain opportunity. In 2005, 19-year-old Sam Altman teamed up with his Stanford classmates, Nick Sivo and Alok Deshpande, to build a mobile service called Radiate, later renamed Looped. Their vision centered on a simple but radical premise: real-time location sharing. At its core, the technology relied on Global Positioning System, or GPS, satellites, which allowed a mobile phone to calculate its approximate physical location on Earth. But the technical foundation was only half the equation. The entire concept rested on massive, unproven assumptions about human behavior. For the service to work, people had to carry connected mobile devices at all times, keep their internet browsers active, and willingly broadcast their exact coordinates to friends. In an era before smartphones dominated daily life, this was an entirely foreign concept. Altman, Sivo, and Deshpande were moving from the structured environment of a university laboratory directly into an unproven market. They possessed the technical capabilities to make the software function, but they faced a deeper, human hurdle. The ultimate question was whether everyday people would actually want to use a service that stripped away their privacy, or if the idea of voluntary, constant tracking would prove too invasive for the public to accept. In the summer of 2005, the newly formed company secured a spot in the inaugural batch of Y Combinator, a nascent startup accelerator run by programmer Paul Graham. Under Graham's mentorship, Altman, Sivo, and Deshpande moved Loop's operations to Mountain View, California, receiving a small initial seed investment of $6,000 per founder. The concept of real-time location mapping quickly caught the attention of Silicon Valley's most prominent gatekeepers. Over the next several years, Loop raised more than $30 million in venture capital, backed by major firms including Sequoia Capital and New Enterprise Associates. To bypass the technical limitations of early mobile web browsers, Altman negotiated directly with telecom giants, securing integration agreements with mobile carriers to pre-install the software on cellular devices. At its peak, Loop grew to 56 employees and registered roughly 5 million users. But raw numbers hit a systemic, grinding friction. The software required a dense network of active users to be valuable. If a user opened the app and found none of their friends nearby, the utility evaporated. User acquisition costs remained high. At the same time, the fundamental premise of the product collided with public anxiety. Everyday users balked at broadcasting their movements, finding the constant tracking intrusive. Competitors like Foursquare emerged, peeling away market share in a race where no single player could find a clear path to profitability. By 2012, the independent run came to an end. Green Dot Corporation acquired Loop for $43.4 million in cash, a deal that included a $9.8 million allocation dedicated to retaining the engineering team. The platform was soon shut down, its location-sharing systems dissolved into Green Dot's prepaid card infrastructure. For Altman, the venture was neither a catastrophic failure nor a runaway consumer triumph. It was a brutal, hands-on education in the realities of corporate survival. At 26, he emerged with $5 million from the sale, a deep understanding of venture capital dynamics, and a clear view of the structural limits of first-generation mobile technology. In 2011, Altman joined Y Combinator as a part-time partner, shifting his daily focus from running a single product to evaluating hundreds of founders. Founded by programmer Paul Graham, Y Combinator operated as a startup accelerator, a specialized institution that provided early-stage companies with seed funding, strategic advice, and immediate access to a tight-knit network of peers. It was a high-velocity sorting mechanism for technology ideas. When Graham decided to step down in early 2014, he named Altman his successor, handing him the presidency of Silicon Valley's premier launchpad. Altman immediately pushed to scale the accelerator's capacity. He moved Y Combinator away from its boutique roots, rapidly expanding the size of its twice-yearly batches. Under his direction, the program grew from supporting a few dozen companies per cycle to over 1,000, vastly increasing the number of active startups in the ecosystem. To support these companies as they matured, Altman launched the YC Continuity Fund in 2015, a $700 million growth stage vehicle designed to extend Y Combinator's financial reach far beyond the initial seed phase. This aggressive expansion solidified the institution's market dominance, backed by the rising valuations of alumni like Airbnb, Stripe, Dropbox, DoorDash, and Reddit. For Altman, the presidency offered massive financial influence, but its true value lay in pattern recognition. By reviewing thousands of applications and observing the trajectory of hundreds of new businesses, he developed an unusual capability for identifying talent. He watched how teams succeeded, why businesses collapsed, and how fast a successful network could expand. The presidency, which he held through 2019, transformed him into a central clearinghouse for tech talent. It was this constant, repeated exposure to hypergrowth that shaped his operational philosophy, preparing him to lead a venture of an entirely different scale. Observing this rapid expansion shifted Altman's focus from individual companies to the broader systems that made them possible. In public essays like How to Be Successful, he outlined a philosophy centered on scale, rapid iteration, and long-term company building. He wrote that extreme success required compounding loops of talent and capital, observing that small, highly focused teams regularly built simple software that became the structural infrastructure for entire industries. At the core of this model were network effects, the principle that a system becomes more valuable as more participants join it. For Altman, this meant connecting founders, engineers, investors, and future executives into a self-reinforcing circle. He began looking beyond individual products, focusing instead on systems that could enable thousands of new businesses to exist. This was a portfolio view of technology where broad bets on structural shifts mattered far more than any single startup's success. But as this obsession with scale grew, it raised a different kind of question. What happens when the goal is no longer to find a successful company, but to develop a general-purpose technology that alters the rules of the game for everyone? The early experiment with Looped had already proved that high-profile backing and millions of registrations do not guarantee a permanent market stronghold. In Silicon Valley, the pressure to turn rapid, visible growth into a durable, self-sustaining category is unrelenting. For Altman, managing a broad portfolio of startups at Y Combinator was no longer enough. In March 2019, he walked away from his presidency at the accelerator, trading his wide-ranging influence over hundreds of young companies for a single, highly concentrated bet on advanced artificial intelligence. But this new frontier operated on an entirely different economic plane. Unlike software startups that scaled cheaply on user acquisition, building artificial general intelligence demanded staggering capital. The primary driver of this new era was raw computing power, the massive processing capacity required to train vast neural networks. The lessons learned from a mobile app that struggled to keep users engaged would now be tested against an engineering challenge of a completely different order of magnitude. Could the principles of hypergrowth survive when applied to a technology requiring virtually limitless infrastructure? To construct these models, the idealistic structure of OpenAI had to change. When the laboratory launched in December 2015 as a nonprofit, it was designed to run open research for the public benefit, supported by $1 billion in commitments from early backers, including Elon Musk. But the raw cost of training frontier systems quickly collided with this charitable design. Building advanced artificial intelligence demanded specialized researchers, cutting-edge graphics processing units, and massive data center capacity. This infrastructure required billions of dollars in steady financing, a sum that philanthropy alone could not supply. In March 2019, the organization created OpenAI LP, a capped profit entity designed to attract private investment while keeping the original nonprofit board in control. This restructure opened the door for Microsoft, which became a major partner, providing the essential cloud computing infrastructure and commercial distribution channels needed to scale. Musk, who had left the board in 2018, later publicly criticized this new model, presenting the position that the company had abandoned its founding promise of open source development. At the same time, the pressure from rivals intensified. Competitors like Google DeepMind, Meta, and Anthropic raced ahead, each pursuing their own combinations of open source sharing, engineering efficiency, safety protocols, and raw scale. This rivalry locked the industry into a difficult trade-off. Slowing down development to address safety concerns risked letting competitors seize the technological lead, while pushing forward as fast as possible risked losing control of the very systems they were trying to build. Multiple authors, artists, and journalists initiated high-stakes copyright lawsuits over training data. These creators claimed their writing, code, and art were scraped without permission or compensation. At the same time, regulators in the United States and Europe began drafting transparency, competition, and safety frameworks, while educators and workers raised immediate alarms over job displacement and academic integrity. Some of the company's own safety researchers warned that model capabilities were outdistancing internal oversight. The severe friction inside OpenAI's leadership in November 2023 served as a stark demonstration that the board, the employees, and strategic partners all claimed different kinds of authority over the technology. This systemic instability left the entire enterprise facing deep, unanswered dilemmas. Was OpenAI moving too quickly, or would slowing down simply allow competitors to move ahead? Can a company pursue enormous commercial opportunities while claiming to build AI for the benefit of humanity? In December 2015, a new research laboratory took shape in San Francisco. Incorporated as a nonprofit, its charter laid out an ambitious mandate to advance digital intelligence in a way most likely to benefit humanity as a whole, unconstrained by any requirement to generate financial returns. This was the birth of OpenAI. The founding group brought together a distinct coalition of Silicon Valley resources and academic talent. Sam Altman and Elon Musk served as co-chairs, securing initial funding commitments of $1 billion from various tech investors. Greg Brockman joined as Chief Technology Officer, while Ilya Sutskever took the role of Research Director. Rounding out the core team were researchers Wojciech Zaremba and John Schulman. Together, they promised to build artificial intelligence openly, sharing their patents and research with the public to prevent concentrated power. In its first years, the laboratory focused on reinforcement learning, a method where AI systems learn through a trial and error process of digital rewards and penalties. The researchers built virtual training grounds, experimented with physical robotic hands, and designed software that could master complex multiplayer video games. Through these early tests, the programs taught themselves to navigate obstacles and coordinate actions without direct human instruction. Releases like OpenAI Gym provided free, standardized toolkits for researchers worldwide, establishing the group as a public-spirited alternative to corporate research. Yet this open research model quickly ran into a physical barrier. Training advanced software models required massive computing power, specialized silicon chips, and immense data infrastructure. As the experiment scaled, the costs grew from millions of dollars to sums that philanthropy alone could not sustain. A structural question began to shadow the laboratory. How could a nonprofit keep pace in a field that demanded industrial-scale resources? A generative pre-trained transformer, or GPT, operates on a straightforward mathematical principle. It does not think, feel, or comprehend the world. Instead, it reads vast quantities of text to analyze how words sit next to one another. By studying these mathematical relationships, the system learns to predict the most likely continuation of any given sentence. It is at its core an advanced pattern recognition machine. To map these patterns, the model uses parameters. Think of parameters not as a measure of biological intelligence, but as adjustable numerical values within the software. Every time the system analyzes text, it tweaks these values to better represent the rules of grammar, logic, and facts. The more parameters the system has, the more complex the patterns it can capture. In 2018, OpenAI introduced GPT-1. Built with 117 million parameters and trained on a dataset of digital books, the model proved that generative pre-training could successfully master the basic structure of human language. It was a successful proof of concept, but the output remained fragmented and limited. The real shift occurred the following year. In 2019, the team scaled the architecture to GPT-2, packing it with 1.5 billion parameters. Suddenly, the predictions became remarkably coherent, producing structured paragraphs, translations, and summaries. This unexpected capability triggered immediate internal alarm. Worried that the technology could be used to generate automated disinformation at scale, the organization made a controversial decision. Rather than publishing the model openly, they opted for a staged release, gradually rolling out larger versions over several months to evaluate the risks. This massive jump in performance proved that model capability was directly tied to scale, but scaling required massive physical infrastructure. This is where Sam Altman's true role as an organizational enabler crystallized. He understood that breakthroughs were no longer just a matter of algorithmic elegance, but of raw processing power. In July 2019, Altman secured a major $1 billion partnership with Microsoft. This agreement did not just supply capital, it provided exclusive access to Microsoft's Azure Cloud Computing Network, giving OpenAI the massive supercomputing clusters required to run unprecedented training workloads. The fruits of this partnership appeared in 2020 with the release of GPT-3. This model was scaled to a staggering 175 billion parameters. The massive increase in size unlocked a phenomenon known as few-shot behavior. For the first time, a user did not need to retrain the model for a specific task. They simply had to provide a few examples of what they wanted, and the system would adapt, demonstrating immediate utility in writing prose, writing software code, translating languages, and answering queries. GPT-3 transformed the industry's understanding of scale, establishing a repeatable formula. Capital buys compute, compute feeds research, and research unlocks capability. In January 2021, the research laboratory expanded its focus from pure text into the visual world, releasing a model called DALL-E. This system combined natural language understanding with image generation, allowing users to type a simple written prompt and receive a completely original picture in return. In April 2022, the group released DALL-E 2, which produced images with far higher resolution and greater stylistic variety. These systems illustrated the real-world capabilities of generative artificial intelligence, software trained to produce original text, images, software code, or other media from human prompts. While these image generators captured public interest, the true breakthrough was still to come. On November 30th, 2022, OpenAI quietly launched ChatGPT as a free public research preview. The chatbot was built on GPT 3.5, a model refined through human feedback to make its conversations more natural and helpful. ChatGPT stood apart because of how people interacted with the system. For the first time, advanced artificial intelligence was accessible through an ordinary web browser in a familiar, conversational format. Anyone could type a question, ask for a recipe, or request a poem, and the system would respond in seconds with clear, coherent paragraphs. This changed how people thought about computers. For decades, humans had to learn specialized programming languages and syntax to make machines perform complex tasks. With ChatGPT, the machine had learned human language, adapting to how people naturally write and speak. The global response was immediate. Within 5 days of its release, ChatGPT registered 1 million users. By January 2023, the platform had reached more than 100 million monthly active users, making it one of the fastest growing consumer applications in history. The sheer speed of adoption caught even the company's leadership by surprise. Across schools and universities, students began using the chatbot to explain complex scientific concepts, draft essays, and study for exams. Programmers turned to the system to write software, find errors in their code, and translate programs between different coding languages. It became a daily assistant for millions of people looking to speed up their work. This groundswell of individual adoption forced major organizations to react. Companies began experimenting with the software to automate customer support, write marketing copy, and analyze financial reports. Venture capital firms redirected billions of dollars toward the field of generative artificial intelligence, funding a new wave of startups that promised to automate cognitive tasks. Governments began studying the technology as a matter of national security and economic strategy, looking at how automated software might affect labor markets, defense systems, and the spread of digital information. The release triggered an intense competition across Silicon Valley. Giant technology firms like Google and Meta scrambled to redirect their resources, declaring internal emergencies and rushing their own competing language models to the public to avoid losing market share. The technology sector entered a high-speed race where development timelines were compressed from years to weeks. At the center of this sudden global shift sat Sam Altman. By guiding the development and deployment of ChatGPT, he had moved from the background of Silicon Valley venture capital directly to the forefront of a major technological shift. He had become the most prominent representative of a collective revolution that was starting to reshape the way humanity works, learns, and communicates. To Altman, the rapid rise of ChatGPT was the predictable output of a single compounding law. He views technological progress as an exponential curve rather than a series of linear steps, measuring progress in repeated percentage increases. In his essay, Moore's Law for Everything, he argued that the compounding power of computation would systematically drive down the cost of everything from energy to labor. In this vision of the future, algorithmic intelligence and abundant energy become virtually free, expanding human productivity on a scale never before imagined. Yet this pursuit of raw scale has its critics. Skeptics argue that relying on exponential projections ignores physical realities, energy grid bottlenecks, chip supply constraints, and severe economic disruption for displaced workers. But within the walls of OpenAI, scale is more than a strategy. It is a fundamental worldview that dictates which risks are worth taking. To Altman, the ultimate danger is not moving too fast, but failing to build the massive compute and power infrastructure required to bring this world of abundance into reality. At the center of this constant expansion sits a concept that has migrated from science fiction directly into global finance: artificial general intelligence. Unlike existing algorithms designed for narrow, specific tasks, a true AG, I would possess a broad intellectual capacity, adapting to almost any mental work a human can perform. OpenAI defines this goal as highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. For the company, pursuing AGI is a broader ambition than simply launching useful software. It is a systematic effort to accelerate scientific discovery, improve medicine, and expand global productivity. Yet this definition represents an organizational target, not a verified reality. Serious disagreements divide the scientific community over when or even if such a system can be built, with predictions ranging from a few years to multiple decades. Critics emphasize that today's large language models merely recognize mathematical patterns, lacking the genuine comprehension that characterizes human thought. At the same time, experts remain deeply split over whether current alignment methods can guarantee the safety of a highly autonomous entity. While Altman predicts rapid development, other researchers warn of unsolvable control problems and permanent economic disruption. This leaves AGI as a deeply contested horizon, where the line between actual technological capability and corporate projection remains entirely blurred. The shift from managing a mobile application to coordinating a global ecosystem reflects a deliberate expansion of scale. Altman moved from the daily mechanics of product development at Looped to the broader portfolio management of Y Combinator, before concentrating resources on physical infrastructure at OpenAI. Each stage built a network that connected early-stage founders, venture capitalists, cloud engineers, and government officials into a tight, self-reinforcing circle. Within this environment, Altman operates on horizons measured in decades, relying on the mathematics of asymmetric risk, where potential gains are massive, even if the probability of failure remains high. This trajectory represents a change in perspective, moving past the survival of a single startup to build a technology capable of altering human productivity. Yet, as this ambition expands to a global scale, the weight of governing such power shifts from a corporate challenge to a historic responsibility. The trajectory of a single builder offers a clear look at a world defined by rapid acceleration. Success in this environment depends on positioning oneself at the precise center of an emerging technological shift. It requires planning for 10-year horizons rather than quarterly returns, a timeline that fundamentally alters how present-day risk is calculated. Within this long-term approach, professional networks compound through repeated access and shared trust, turning early connections into massive institutional influence. Yet this model reveals sharp limitations. Failure is only useful if it produces cold, practical judgment. Romanticizing past setbacks misses the point. When progress is exponential, gradual shifts remain virtually invisible until their cumulative effects become overwhelming. At that scale, enlarged ambition solves bigger problems but also expands the scope of potential mistakes. This creates a stark imbalance. The rewards of asymmetric risk often flow to a select few, while the societal downside falls on an entirely different population. As technology outpaces historical guardrails, the line between commercial opportunity and public responsibility dissolves. The strategy of a single executive ceases to be a private venture, transforming instead into a force that alters the collective future. The scale of this technological shift relies on conditional possibilities. If these systems are deployed responsibly, they may fundamentally alter daily labor. In software development, tools are already helping programmers prototype and debug code in a fraction of the time. In medicine, algorithms could assist doctors by analyzing complex diagnostic images, streamlining clinical paperwork, and simulating molecular structures for drug discovery, though every trial still requires strict validation and ultimate human judgment. Scientific researchers may use these models to synthesize vast libraries of literature, run simulations, and generate entirely new hypotheses. In classrooms, the technology could offer personalized tutoring, depending on student access and how individuals learn. On factory floors, physical robots might soon connect digital reasoning to manual tasks, while office workers and financial analysts use automated systems to handle routine reporting and daily communication. Yet these potential gains are not guaranteed to be shared equally. While reported laboratory experiments show immense promise, independent real-world measurements are still emerging. The unresolved question is not whether the technology can perform these tasks, but how the benefits will be distributed. As productivity rises, society must decide who receives the financial gains of automated intelligence and who is left to absorb the economic disruption. The social cost of this rapid expansion is already registering across the global economy. In the labor market, automated software is beginning to restructure routine work. While new technical and safety-related roles are appearing, some traditional positions face direct displacement, slowing real wage growth in highly exposed sectors. In the information ecosystem, synthetic media is altering the definition of proof. 82 deepfakes across 38 countries were documented during the 2024 election cycle, including an artificial robocall that targeted voters in New Hampshire. This technology lowers the technical barriers to misinformation and cyber abuse, making authentic evidence increasingly difficult to verify. At the same time, creators, authors, and publishers have filed major copyright lawsuits, arguing that their articles, books, and artwork were ingested to train systems without permission or payment. Alongside these individual harms, the physical infrastructure of advanced AI is concentrating power in unprecedented ways. Only a few organizations command the vast capital, specialized silicon, data, and massive energy grids required to build frontier models. This concentration occurs during an intense geopolitical race, where governments and corporations prioritize development speed over safety controls. While optimists argue that deploying these systems is the only way to build effective safeguards, critics point to a growing lag in public oversight. The central challenge is no longer about the ambitions of one executive. It is whether society possesses the tools to govern the concentrated power of an organization like OpenAI. The architecture of our collective future is no longer a distant projection. It is being coded in real time. As one man and a single private institution steer this unprecedented leap, the boundary between corporate ambition and public destiny completely dissolves. The question is no longer how fast these algorithms will scale, but who holds the emergency brake when they do. We are entering a world where we must learn to coexist with our own creations. The code is already running. Share your thoughts on who should govern this future in the comments below.